Hey Crestwood, happy Wednesday to you all. Hope you all are doing well. It is gloomy outside, but we trust that God is providing us with the warmth that we need to shine His light in this world and live out this day. Hope you are doing well. It's great to be with you on this most commanding day of the year. It is March 4th, and I'm glad to bring you this devotional today. I'm a part of a pastor's group that meets once a month to look at a sermon and then sort of dissect it and see what we can learn from it. And the sermon yesterday was from an African-American lady, and it was on this kind of obscure passage in 1 Kings. And I want to tell you about it because I find it so fascinating. So Elijah, who's one of the Hebrew prophets at the time, is fleeing from a queen named Jezebel, evil queen, who wants to kill Elijah because he has put to death some of the pagan prophets that exist. And so he's running for his life, and it says he came to this place called Beersheba, which is in Judah, and he went out into the desert. So he's out in the desert by himself, and he came to this bush, and he sits down under it, and he prays to God to die. And what he says is, "I've had enough, Lord." That's the quote from Scripture. I've had enough. How many times in our lives have we looked at all that's going on around us in our personal lives, in our community, in our country, in our world, and said, "I've had enough, Lord. That's it. I can't take any more." So Elijah lays down and falls asleep, and an angel touches him and says, "Get up and eat," and provides bread for him to eat. So many times in my life, I feel like, "Ooh, God, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore." I know the sentence says God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I don't believe that at all. I don't think God gives us anything that we can handle. I think life sometimes gives us a lot more than we can handle, and we just say enough. But God is always there to provide. God is always there to give us what we need, the nourishment, the sustenance to make it through whatever we are going through. So Elijah gets up and eats, and he goes off to this mountain, very famous mountain, Mount Oreb, and he spends some time in a cave there. And he's continuing to struggle with the fact that everything seems like it's pressing against him. He's the only one who's being faithful. He doesn't know what to do with his fear and his anxiety and his despair. And God says to him, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." You know, we know that story in Moses, where God passes by and Moses gets to see God's backside. But listen to what happens with Elijah. So he's standing on the mountain, and it says this: "Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And the voice said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" So often we look for God in the big things. We look for signs and wonders and things to let us know, "God, let us know that you are here." And so often God is in the whisper. Are we creating space in our lives to hear God's whisper? We're going to talk about this on Sunday when we look at Psalm 46, which talks about all the world being in turmoil. Where is God in the midst of that? Sometimes God is in the whisper. How are we creating space to listen for God's voice in the midst of the whisper, in the midst of the fires and the earthquakes and the wind and everything that is going on around us? So often I feel like God is in the little things, in the small things. We trust God's promises that God's always at work. God is always with us. God is always in the midst of whatever it is that we're going through. But sometimes it's only in the form of a whisper, which means we have to stop, be quiet, lean in to hear what God has to say. You know, I often find myself begging God for a word. "God, let me know that you are here. Let me hear from you. Let me see that there is something you are doing in the midst of this chaos, in the midst of this violence, in the midst of this conflict that's going on. Let me know that you are here." But I don't stop and let God respond. I then go on with my day or my to-do list, or let my fear or anxiety take over, and I don't just stop and listen for God's whisper. I think it's ironic that Elijah goes to the desert, because there are things going on in deserts in the Middle East right now which are causing a lot of people fear and despair and concern, and it's all legit. But I trust God's promises. God is there. God is at work, maybe only in the form of a whisper. So Crestwood, today I want to encourage you, stop and listen God may be whispering something to you, a word of comfort, a word of hope, a word of remembering that God is with you and that Jesus Christ died for you. We need to hear God's voice. May we stop and create the space for God to whisper to us. God bless you, Crestwood.